Welcome to Leaders in Action Looking Ahead. I'm Robin Trimingham of the Olderhood Group, and my guests today are Olderhood CEO Bill Storie and Scott Stout, who is the co-founder and CEO of MedVector. Today, we're chatting about leveraging telemedicine to accelerate clinical trials for the benefit of hospitals and patients. Welcome, Scott. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for finding a few minutes to chat with us. I know you've had a pretty busy week. Just start us all off here. This is going to sound like a very basic question, but what exactly is a clinical trial?
Okay. So clinical trials are necessary to get new medications to the public. And so it is a series of medical tests where the industry would use a certain number of subjects to find out the efficacy of new medications.
Very good. So what is the correlation between a drug patent and a clinical trial?
So the industry is very frustrated, if not broken, in that while a clinical trial itself might only take a single patient 6 to 12 months to go through it, and then there's typically 3 different studies that a medication will walk through before they get FDA approval. The problem with the industry is HIPAA privacy laws make it very difficult to identify and enroll enough subjects to participate in a clinical trial. So if you're thinking of a new medication that cures blindness, right? This is a medication that people would love to know about. And the company that's creating this medication can't buy a list of blind people because of HIPAA privacy laws. So it becomes inherently difficult to find these subjects to enroll and participate in these advanced medicine studies. So while the average time of getting through a single trial is roughly 6 to 12 months for a single patient, finding enough patients to get through all 3 phases of clinical trials typically takes 10 years. Wow. So that gives you an idea of how broken the industry is. Now, all industries are, motivated to get to market quickly, but pharmaceutical companies are especially motivated because of the medical patent that sits behind that medication. So while the medical patent is a 20-year patent, if it takes 10 years to get to market, that patent clock is ticking in the background. And so it's huge losses to pharmaceutical companies by having these delays in their clinical trials. And these numbers are huge, right? So there's a medication called Humira that a lot of people are familiar with.
Sure.
And the value of their patent currently is worth $1.8 billion a month. So when you talk about the expensive clinical trials and them being expensive, they're really not expensive compared to the value of that medical patent. So accelerating these clinical trials, rather than accelerating the trials, because we're not trying to cut corners in medicine, but eliminating those delays is kind of the holy grail of this industry right now.
So clinical trials then have been historically very slow. They take a lot of time and obviously they cost a lot of money. Has that changed over the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years? I know we're going to chat about telemedicine in a minute or two, but has there been any change to that over the last, as I say, X number of years?
So the industry in general is very much looking for ways to utilize new technologies to accelerate these time to markets for these medications. Just to give you an example of the growth of this industry, in the year 2000, there were 4,000 clinical studies registered worldwide. So in the year 2000, there were 4,000 clinical trials. In 2018, there were 260,000 clinical studies registered on clinicaltrials.gov. So the growth of this industry is exponential. And so it's really hurting the people in the growth of this industry because of things like simple things like Google, right? So researchers are now posting their results online rather than it being proprietary, and then everybody can kind of stand on those shoulders. And so we've got more medicines coming to market now. Now, the FDA approval rate has actually stayed level, meaning there's still only, roughly 15 to 30 medications that are approved every year, even though there's so much more medicine that's trying to come to market. And so what's happening is the population hasn't grown as quickly as the number of studies that are out there. And the studies all pretty much require the same amount of people. And now instead of one company going after this market, we now have 10 companies going after the same use case in the same market, which is further bifurcating the subject enrollment components. So it's being stretched too thin, and we're looking for ways to incorporate subjects from other countries, from different communities. Right now, there's big diversity issues within the clinical trial markets, simply because the majority of the clinical trial sites are in affluent neighborhoods where the doctors live. And so, inner cities having access to advanced medicine, rural communities having access to advanced medicine is also all of a sudden a new component in clinical trials.
So tell us then, how is telemedicine transforming these patient trials for the benefit of everybody?
Well, so it's not yet, and that's what we're trying to do. So, telemedicine. When we started this company 4 years ago, telemedicine was kind of a new word for everybody, and then we were kind of struggling with our message when speaking with doctors, and doctors would say, "Well, I need more than telemedicine. I need to. My patient needs to be physically in front of me for me to treat them." Well, and then COVID happened, right?
Yeah.
And all of the doctors that were kind of pushing back on telemedicine are starting to realize that, what am I actually doing to treat a patient? It's labs, it's scans, and it's talking to the patient. How do you feel? Where does it hurt? So yes, there's still physicals and surgeries and instances where we do need to be face-to-face. But a lot of the treatment that happens right now in the medical industry is verbal and visual, and then labs and scans. And now labs and scans are completely digital now, right? So you can get an X-ray anywhere in the world and send that X-ray to your doctor. Same with an MRI or an ECG. The movement of telemedicine, COVID really kind of pushed it forward. Now, when we talk about clinical trials, there's actually no treatment at all that's happening with these subjects. The subjects are being monitored by principal investigators. So there's no deviation from the protocol, and there's no variability from visit to visit. So telemedicine is very much a great solution for this industry, and it's just been really slow to adopt.
So is that then because there are more medicines, and I don't want to use that word naively, but are there more medicines in the pipeline, and therefore there are more clinical trials being needed?
I would say in any advancement in science and the collective minds together of the world from Google, right, and other research platforms, is yes, creating more use cases for old elements. We've got AIs that are out there looking for different combinations of drugs that we haven't thought of before. So yes, there is a lot more out there than there was a few years ago.
Is that because there is a demand for more medicine, in the sense that years ago we didn't have a cure, shall we say, for XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
Now we do, but we'd like to refine that. We'd like to make it better.
Well, I'd say that there's, while there aren't new ailments for the most part, there are advances in old medicines. So like there are old medicines that used to be injectables that are now pills. And so anytime a new version of the same medicine comes down the pipeline, it has to go through clinical trials. And the three phases that the clinical trials are testing for is, the first one is toxicity, right? So that's, what are the toxic levels within humans? So they typically do preclinical trials to make sure that they know the safe zones. But then in phase 1 clinical trials, it's all about toxicity and looking for those side effects. If a patient accidentally takes too much, what happens? If the patient doesn't take enough, what happens? And so that's what the phase 1 study is all about. Phase 2 is what we've all heard about with the double-blind study And it's looking for a statistical significance between the two groups of one that has the placebo and one that doesn't. Then phase 3, which is typically the largest, which is what happens right before FDA approval, is all about efficacy. How well does it work? What are the patients saying about it? How are the labs bringing down levels of the areas that we're looking for? And then also, all 3 phases they're constantly recording those side effects.
Well, it's so great to hear about a cutting edge industry and all of the ways that this is going to improve healthcare and healthcare outcomes for everybody. You've been watching Leaders in Action Looking Ahead. Join us again soon for more from Scott Stout.